Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 with Michaela Harrison. I'm really excited for you all to listen to this episode. It is chock full of insight and medicine with laughter sprinkled in. I know there are a lot of people out there interested in, connected to, communicating with whales all across the world. And I also know that there are folks out there who aren't interested in whales, and that's totally fine. Some people gravitate more toward manatees, sharks, stingrays, or another animal that lives in a different environment. That's totally fine. That's dope. All animals need love. Everyone has that one animal or those animals that they really love and gravitate toward or identify with. What I will say is that whether you are interested in whales or not, I still recommend listening to this episode because Michaela also talks about the importance of being aware of the web of life beyond human beings and interspecies relationship building, which she passionately says is central to collective healing and liberation. She also shares about ancestral guidance, the power of the voice, sound, and music, and we even talk about telepathy. I've been hearing the call of whales for a long time, and I know other people across space-time are also hearing the whales in one form or another. Over the years, I've gone on YouTube and listened to whales and dolphins, and without searching this out, I have come across so many people doing work with whales, from womb workers, and dream tenders to scientists studying whale behavior and whale communication. I'll literally be minding my business, doing something that has nothing to do with whales, and cross paths or start having conversations with people who are having dreams about whales. I have never had a dream about a whale, but I hope to one day. So they are coming into our dream time. They're coming into people's dream time. And I wonder what it would be like to hear people's whale dreams in one space, in a dream circle or some type of aquatic themed dream gathering. And maybe it doesn't have to stop at whales. People who are having dreams about dolphins and seals or seaweed could join too. All right, let's get back on track. Among the people who I've come across working with whales is Michaela, and I'm going to read part of her bio. You can read the full version on her website, which will be linked in the show notes. Michaela A. Harrison is a recently returned Washington, D.C. native whose career is rooted in relaying the healing, transformational power of music through song. She has performed nationally and internationally as a soloist and with various bands and musical collectives. As a resident of New Orleans for over 17 years, Michaela established an enthusiastic following at local venues such as Café Istanbul, Second Vine Wine, Ashé Cultural Arts Center, and Three Keys at the Ace Hotel. Michaela began singing in the Baptist church at age 5. Her musical style incorporates her gospel roots, as well as a diverse range of genres including jazz, blues, R&B, soul, samba, MPB, and African traditional music. As a protege of Bernice Johnson Reagon, I hope I pronounced the last name right, founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock, Michaela is well versed in spirituals, work songs, and African American protest music from the Civil Rights era. With a 4-octave range and a vocal quality that runs the gamut from pristine sweetness to fiercely powerful belting, Michaela has often been compared to such greats as Minnie Riperton and Mahalia Jackson, though she maintains a signature style that distinguishes her voice as easily recognizable no matter what she is singing. Her soulful, heartfelt delivery of both covers and original music has often moved audiences to tears. Holding a bachelor's degree in foreign service and a master's in Africana studies, Michaela has also studied and lived in East Africa and Brazil, fluent in French and Portuguese and familiar with Spanish and Swahili, Michaela has an expanded repertoire of world music and renders songs in their original languages. She infuses her performances with insightful commentary based on her multicultural perspective, simultaneously uplifting and educating audiences. And again, that's just a part of her bio. The full version is on her website. I remember when I first learned about Michaela's work. I think somebody sent me an IG post of her sitting on the edge of a rocking boat in the ocean, wearing white, singing to the whales. And I remember adding this video to one of my IG highlights dedicated to mermaids. I added her to this highlight because at the time I was thinking a lot about mermaids and black mermaids more specifically, but I must have felt mermaid vibes from her, and that's why I added her video to my highlight. Now keep this in mind when you listen to the episode. So after I learned about Michaela's work, I started tuning into what she's been doing off and on, and I went to two online workshops. I went to two online workshops she offered. Oh my gosh, I just trip over my words, you know. And I'm also feeling, I think I have a lisp. I think I have a lisp. I'm like, why is it so hard for me to read right now? Anyway, I attended two of her online workshops, and we learned about her experiences going out to sea and connecting with the whales. And then we listened to whale song recordings that she took. I really appreciate this space she's created, she's creating to listen to the sounds of whales, because as much as I like whale recordings on YouTube, there's nothing wrong with whale recordings on YouTube. I feel like I can connect to whales and their voices within some kind of context or story. I hope that makes sense. And I never thought about having some sort of whale guide, even though I know that there are whale guides out there. And so recently I've been thinking about how I would like to intentionally connect with whales through Michaela's work because one, what they are doing together is really intriguing. And two, because I've been hearing whales for so long, but I don't think I've stopped to really listen. I hope you'll join me in stopping to listen to and be present with whales by listening to this episode and doing your own explorations wherever you are. All right, listeners, if you can/want to, please take your time listening to this episode. Make a cup of tea at home, find a cozy cafe, or listen on the go. Either way, I hope you find at least one thing in this episode that is interesting, sparks your curiosity, is helpful, or inspiring in some way. Until next time. Welcome to the podcast, Michaela. I'm so excited to have you here to share about your work. I'm just truly honored. And before we jump into the interview, I'd love to know, how are you doing during this time? Whatever you want to share, feel free.
Hey, Simone. It's great to be here with you. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our watery conversation. Um, I'm keeping it peaceful. I'm keeping it peaceful. There's a lot of tumult, in the air, both on personal and global levels and everything in between. I'm definitely feeling it. I'm definitely impacted by it. And I am diligently deepening into my meditative and other spiritual practices on the daily to maintain that peace. So yeah, that's how I am right now, feeling very sensitized and aware of, how much shift is happening and how many people are in upheaval and being harmed, and feeling a responsibility to be holding that practice of peace and presence, um, because it is a privilege to be in the position I'm in, to be, safe and in a relative degree of comfort. And so I'm holding that vibration of peace. Um, yeah, that's how I'm doing.
Thank you for sharing that. I love holding the vibration of peace, you know, and staying devoted to your meditation practice, your spiritual practices. Um, Thank you for sharing that. I just like to hear how folks are doing, you know. I feel like asking how we are doing, especially during this time, is really important.
Yes.
You know, it's a lot is happening out there. Um, and and so I invited you to be on this podcast because I've been following your work for a while. I've been sort of tracking how people have been working with whales, communicating with whales, and um, I think your journey is really interesting how it's just unfolded over the years. And so I have some questions that I would like to ask you. But first, I read that you're a singer. You sang across the country and the world. I looked at some of your videos. And so one of my first questions is like, who or what has guided you on your musical journey?
Oh, I got chills. Um, so clearly the ancestors are like us. Yeah, I have a very strong connection with my ancestors. So want to bring them in right away. Um, Ashé, all my benevolent ancestors. I grew up singing gospel music in church, and I always felt particularly connected to spirituals. And um, I had some kind of understanding even as a young child, because I started singing in gospel choir at 4 or 5. I had some kind of understanding early on that this was connecting me to some very important history, some very important story, that was part of my thread. And as I got older and understood that these were songs that came out of the experience of enslavement, um, I I came to cherish them and value them even more deeply. And a lot of that understanding came through my connection to Dr. Bernice Johnson Regan, who joined the Ancestors last year. She was the founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock, Black women's a cappella vocal group, and one of the original SNCC freedom singers during the civil rights movement, an amazing scholar and singer and songwriter and mentor. And in working with her, I really came to understand the depth of the value of these song traditions that produced me, you know. And so definitely carrying that torch is an essential part of how I move music through me and how music moves through me and with me. Um, and Yeah, I have lots of, specific singers who've been inspirations that I could name. Minnie Riperton's definitely at the top, Aretha Franklin, Bob Marley,
Yeah.
Luther Vandross, Ella Fitzgerald, Nina Simone. There's a long list. Sam Cooke. Um, so yeah, I feel very blessed to come out of a very powerful musical tradition that raised me up.
That's beautiful. It sounds like fertile soil. I don't know. It sounded like fertile soil, or I'm sure there are many ways to describe that, but I felt it, when you were describing the all the folks involved. Um, and I wonder, is there a song that's really alive for you right now? A song or the sound of an instrument? Is there any sort of something sonic, voice, sound that's alive for you right now?
I mean, whale song.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whale song is pretty much ringing in my ears all the time.
Yes.
Um,
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like that whale communication is strong and robust, which I can't wait to get to. Because we're about to dive into that because I have another question that's not whale related, but um I noticed that you're a DC native, Washington, DC native. You lived in New Orleans for a long time, Brazil,
mhm.
and I also read East Africa. So I'm curious, however much you want to share, like how have all these different places with the different cultures and languages, how have they shaped you over the years?
Definitely given me a strong sense of diasporic identity. Um, I went to Kenya for study abroad as a 20-year-old. Um, and that definitely kind of reoriented my whole universe, and my time in Europe as a teenager and in my 20s, I visited France and Belgium and have since gone back to some other places, but connecting with the African diaspora there as well was very significant for me. So I feel like I early on, and then I did a certificate in African studies in my undergrad studies and went on to get a master's in Africana studies. So definitely this focus on diaspora, the African diaspora as an identity and as a way, again, of kind of pulling in different puzzle pieces to in the putting together of the story of my own um, history and trajectory in terms of filling in the blanks of so much that I didn't get in school or even from family history, um, and then just the wonderment of understanding how um, resilient and powerful um, this root of African culture is as it has, traveled around the world and spread in so many directions and evolved in so many ways that I'm still connected to it, even though I'm, you know, many generations and a few centuries out from Africa in terms of birthplace, et cetera. It's still very much a part of me. And so carrying that consciousness through everything I do for sure. And also in terms of the intention for how my work um, has meaning and impact, want it to be beneficial throughout the diaspora as well, and for all people, for all beings, not exclusive to the African diaspora certainly, but definitely with that inspiration and focal point as the foundation.
Mm. Ooh, I love all of that because I've been thinking a lot about connecting, reconnecting to the continent because my dad is Ghanaian and I've kind of been slow to explore that heritage. But in my mind, I'm like, well, this is a way to kind of connect to Africa on my paternal side, but also on my maternal line, there's also that connection. And I like how you say, I like how you're saying to carry this consciousness, this consciousness of Africa and the root that it is, and having this diasporic identity, which I feel like growing up in New York City, I felt like
Mhm.
I felt like I could, no one knew if I was Ghanaian, if I was from the Caribbean, if I was, no one knew anything, African American.
Mhm.
So it's like, it's cool to be fluid in that way. And I feel like I hear the fluidity in what you're sharing. Um, that's really cool though, all the travels you've gone on in your life. And so now we're going to get to the whales, the whale whispering. So you also describe yourself. I'm going to do a whole another intro at the beginning, kind of introducing this episode, sharing more of your bio, but you also introduce yourself as being an intergalactic siren. I love this and I want to know more. Tell us, what is it to be an intergalactic siren?
Well, um, I sing. My understanding of what sirens do is they summon. There's a whole lore about sirens and the sea. And my understanding of that, my experience of that, and particularly, through this journey with the whales, is that there's a healing song that is being spun by a certain population of folks, of beings who sing. And I definitely, hold at the core of my song work the intention for healing. And that's not limited to Earth. It's not limited to humans, and it's not limited to Earth. I've always felt a connection with the stars and um, the planets and entities beyond this zone and this visible physical reality. So intergalactic feels like an appropriate way to describe what I do, because I definitely think about how sound um, reverberates and projects, and how vibration travels, you know, infinitely. And so when I'm very intentional when I open my mouth to sing. I'm very careful about the energy that I'm projecting, because I understand that it's traveling, it's traveling a long way, and wherever it may strike, wherever it may land, I want it to land in a way that feels infused with the intentions that I'm sending out.
That's beautiful. Yeah, more and more I'm realizing the voice is so powerful. Like you literally can manifest what you speak. Even you could just be saying something in passing, not even thinking
Absolutely.
about it, and it comes to pass. And when being an intergalactic siren, I think of like, your sound, your song, you know, um going into other dimensions, if we think of the four directions, um different dimensions, different planes, different realms, whatever word people want to use. But I really resonate with you being an intergalactic siren, and I've never heard of that before, and I'm actually really into mermaids. So, it's nice to meet an intergalactic siren and kind of hear that affirmation of the voice, and sound. And that even if you
Mhm.
can't see, we're talking right now and we could see people singing, but even if you don't see the vibration, it's still there, it's still happening.
Mhm.
And it makes you think about the unseen and kind of trust. I don't know if trust comes up in your work.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, it's so essential to any relationship, obviously, but in particular in developing relationship with these beings who inhabit the ocean and who have this history of being hunted, you know, recent history of being hunted. I mean, whaling was only outlawed internationally um, less than 50 years ago. So there are whales who are alive now who have had loved ones who have been slaughtered, through whaling, and who themselves have, experienced wounding as a result of that practice. So for them to enter into relationship with humans requires a tremendous amount of trust on their part. And from my perspective, a tremendous amount of respect for that history and responsibility in terms of how I approach and move within relating to them, to be as trustworthy, as worthy of their trust as I can be, with the energy that I bring, and always coming with offering, and with humbleness, and allowing them, or not even allowing, rather being in surrender to them dictating the flow of our interchanges.
Mm. Ooh, thank you for sharing that because I felt like that was a great perspective shift for me because I don't think maybe for a lot of people you get the whale's perspective because usually it's the human being's perspective of whaling, like whaling history, but not the whale's history of maybe one of their family members being killed or something, or even being aware that some of the whales have wounds. So I think that you know that really changes your perspective, and I think that's helpful for you know um human beings to be aware of other histories besides the histories of human beings.
For
and all
sure.
Yeah, and I love how you're this trust being involved in your relationship, which when I was making my questions, I didn't even think about trust, but now I'm like, wow, can you imagine you're going out to sea and you're singing and maybe they're like, who is this? And then you're building this relationship. That's going to take some trust, all kinds of trust.
A
There's
lot.
with the people you're working with, I don't know, the boat functioning, all sorts of things. It's like kind of multidimensional. And you know, I guess I wonder, whenever how do you strengthen your trust? Like how do you kind of steward your trust in your life?
Well, I go back to my spiritual practice. As I said, meditation is at the core of it, and feeling like I have kind of a continuous thread that keeps me tapped in to source, you know, um, is definitely something that fortifies my sense of trust in life in general. Trust in my path, trust in myself. This relationship with my ancestors and the spiritual traditions of my ancestors fortifies my trust. Um, and again, I come back to this word surrender. It's a big part of it because in order to trust, you must surrender to some extent because there is unknown, you know, inherent in the act of trusting. You know, you're saying that even though I don't know, blah, 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 I'm trusting and I'm moving forward with whatever this is, um, with the trust that I will be all right through whatever it is, you know. I will figure out how to be all right through whatever it is, um, and not allow the unknown to keep you from having that experience. So, yeah, and trust in myself. You know, I'm a very intuitive person. Um, and I have been, you know, with regard to the whales in particular, I've been an animal whisperer my whole life. So I've had, you know, 5+ decades of building trust in my ability to have this telepathic connection, um, and rely on it and interpret it and lean into it and understand it. So yeah.
I I I love that because another one of my questions, which was going to be later down, is about telepathy. Because I read in the intro of your blog, you're like, it might be hard for some people to accept that I actually am telepathically communicating with the whales. And I was like, wow, it's so nice and maybe supportive for a lot of people to hear other people's telepathic experiences. And especially with I'm sure that, you know, we can many of us can communicate with animals, but I think there are people who specifically identify as animal communicators. One of my little sisters is really into animals and she's going to veterinary high school. She's one of those people who's really attuned to animals. Um,
Hmm.
and so um you already share, but I just wanted to kind of name that it feels nice when other people share about their telepathy, because we get these messages that it's not real or it has to be it's not scientifically proven when telepathy has been around for probably thousands of years, and I don't know, I think it's just nice to name telepathic communication.
I mean, for me, it is an intentional, um, integral aspect of decolonization work because telepathy has been around, I would say, for more than millennia. I would say that it's an integral part of being an animal. You know, humans are animals as well. And it's a capacity that we all have. And this idea that it's um, woo or dismissible as not real, all of that is part of the colonial project. You know, there's not any indigenous culture that I can think of that I know of that doesn't have a very matter of fact understanding of humans' ability to communicate mind to mind.
Mhm.
And this idea that it's ridiculous to know this, not just to affirm it and believe it, but to know it because you live it and you practice it, has everything to do with, the devaluation of indigenous tradition and values and practices. So naming that as part of the way I move and work is a very intentional and doing this without I do work with scientists, I work with marine biologists and oceanographers on this project. They're very much how I got to be doing this work, practically. And I never feel the need to justify what I do. I never feel the need to back it up with science. People always want to ask me about that. And I'm like, yeah, it's there. You can talk to the scientists, and I respect their work. And I feel like it has a tremendous amount of value. And I don't feel the need to validate what I do with
Mhm.
with science, because I know what I'm doing. I'm living it. It's valid because it's my experience.
Mhm. I just heard shouts. The whole time you was
Yes.
the whole time you was talking, I just
Yes.
heard shouts because I heard shouts because I personally I really appreciate this because I feel like I'm still in the place where I have a kind of a hard time um kind of you know saying my expressing my experiences, for fear of it being woo woo or it changing my relation how people treat me and changing my relationships. But I feel like people are always doing that, especially on social media, like letting folks know, this is my experience, this is who I am as I change and become. And it's like you almost can deepen in your practice or your medicine or the relationship when you just sort of kind of not care what people think, because you're having your experience and like you said, and that sounded just like a firm I know, uh, like a confident I know I am, and I think that I just thank you. I appreciate hearing that. Yeah. I said, is that my grandma shouting? That's somebody. That's somebody, but
I love it. I love that you're here shouting.
yes. And so now we are going to dive even deeper. So can you share with our listeners what is whale whispering and how is it an ancestral calling for you?
Oh, well, whispering is so many things, so many layers. In terms of the ancestral piece, it is definitely um, rooted in the Middle Passage and the journey that millions of Africans made from the continent to, what are now referred to as the Americas. And my understanding through meditation, um, that on these journeys, um, these slaving vessels were accompanied by whales, and that there were interactions between the whales and the Africans on board these ships. Same way that I have interactions with the whales when I go out to sea, they also did. And that there's a precedent for what I'm doing, actually. And that they heard the whale singing, from the hold of the ship, from the belly of the beast, as it were, and that sound brought comfort to them. That the whales also heard their singing and their moaning and their wailing and their crying out, and they bore witness to it. And that there is an element, that there are aspects of whale song that are echoes of those sounds that they bore witness to for 400 years, you know, during, or for 250 years, however long, the trajectory starting in the 1600s, 1500s, actually, um, through the 1800s, of Africans being transported um, as captives. And so that there was this exchange that happened, and one that so that there's this memory of these sounds of that journey that exists inside of whale song that my ancestors pointed me to, that I am now exploring in order to, one, just connect with them and the auditory reverberations of that journey, and also to tap into survival sounds. You know, it was like specifically exploring how, you know, vocal expression um, made that journey survivable, you know. And of course, not everyone survived, but I'm in a specific way with a portion of this work exploring how singing, collective singing, and vocalizing were central to survival, the survival of those who did make the journey across, and how the whales were central to that. And um, that inside of those sounds and the reverberations of those sounds, there's information, there's inspiration, and um, seeds that were planted whose time has come to sprout. And so I'm like going in to kind of root out what is applicable and useful to this time in terms of co-creating with the whales, sounds and songs to survive this moment right now. So that's at the core of it. And so I am composing music um, through the project, that's inspired by and co-created with the whales and the ancestors. And then another big part of it is this water work and um, encouraging humans to be in ever more intimate relationship with water, as a part of not just stewarding and caring for, our natural environment and the planet as a whole, which, yes, that, um, and also as an act of repair for ourselves, because we're all water. Every living being depends on water, so it's a unifying force. And I'm very aware of the unifying power of music. And so this understanding that there's an alchemy when you put music and water together, you have these two incredibly powerful unifying forces. So that feels like a very necessary medicine for this time, um, in looking at the degree of disparity and separation and contention that that exists on the planet right now. So this is my offering, um, as an antidote to that.
Mhm. It's beautiful, beautiful medicine. I didn't even know that about the whales and the transatlantic slave trade, and I just learned something. I mean, besides reading about your work, I just learned something new about the collective voicing, sounding alongside the whales during that passage. And also, me having to get over this whole woo thing, it also kind of reminded me of the quantum field, like you doing this work. I mean, sometimes it's been hard to kind of connect to like what you do now has an impact on those before you and after you. But what you shared, I felt like I can grasp that, in a kind of quantum field way that, when you are working with the the whales, you're really tapping into a lot. That's what it sounds like. It's like a ripple, you know, some kind of ripple through time, and that water and sound
Mm-hmm.
aid that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, I'm really searching for ways to understand this idea of like healing across space time. Um and and more and more I'm like, wow, music is so powerful. And I love how how you said the necessary medicine, and it being like a unifier. Um and and so I just kind of wanted to mirror that, or reflect that back to you, and just say such beautiful medicine. It's it's really
Thank you,
beautiful.
Simone.
Yeah, I'm so glad that with all that goes on in life, that you're able to connect to what you're sharing. You know, you're able to hear and connect, and like somehow it's coming through, which I think is really exciting. Um and and this will kind of tie into two questions. I read that you've been singing and listening to the same whale community that migrates from Bahia, Brazil to Antarctica for seven
Mm-hmm.
years. And so
Mm-hmm.
first, that's amazing. And I'm curious, what kind of whales are they? And can you describe or introduce this whale community to our listeners?
I'd be happy to. They're humpback whales. And there's lots of dolphins in the mix as well. I want to shout out other members of the cetacean
Shout out to the
family.
dolphins.
Yeah, the dolphins definitely get involved. But in terms of the singing work, the song work, they're humpback whales, which are the whales that actually sing whole songs that, you know, humans have been able to record and identify as repeating patterns that have specific structure and a beginning and an end, and therefore get identified as songs. Um, yeah, they migrate between Brazil and Antarctica. And um, when the work of the organization that I have been doing this work in partnership with, the Instituto Baleia Jubarte, which is the Humpback Whale Institute, um, they have been in operation for 35, I think, maybe 36 years now, um, and have been key in, you know, changing the culture around these whales, specifically this population of whales, from whaling to whale watching and whale wonder, you know. Um, and so I feel like there's something very particular about this population of whales that's special. They're all special. But Bahia is a very special place. It's a very magical place. It's a place where um, the water deities are very much honored and, um, kept active. And people's relationship with the sea in particular is one of veneration and respect. And um, yeah, there's an integration of mystical um, adeptness, I want to say, that the people of Bahia have in their relationship to the sea. So these whales, they know that and they feel that. And so there's a way in which um, I guess the environment is already perfectly attuned and kind of primed for me to do what I'm doing, you know? And yeah, so the people who, operate um, the the research and kind of tourism, that spring forth out of the whale work that's happening there. They have been in relationship with this population of whales for decades, and the population has grown from what was less than 2,000 when the project started to more than 20,000 now. And so, yeah, there's a way in which this particular population has experienced resilience, you know, and has experienced through this human whale exchange a benefit, um, in terms of their own survival and ability to live, without the threat of slaughter. Um, and so I do feel like, one, I feel like these whales called me to them, you know, and I feel like, yeah, it's the perfect environment. So I have whales in particular that everybody in the region who works those waters knows. They know those whales, they come back every year. They have, each whale is identifiable by their fluke, by their tail markings. And I'm just beginning to now get into, oh, I should probably be identifying, doing my best to identify the whales that I'm interacting closely with, to kind of have physical um, markers of these specific whales. I'm certain that there's, specific whales that are coming back to this work year after year. I can recognize them by their voices, by their energetic presence, but I'm just starting to move into, let me see if I can, get some physical identifiers to, connect these whales to the work, coming back year after year.
Wow. Wow, that makes me want to go to Bahia.
Come on.
I mean, for you just saying that makes me, I mean, how you describe the place and how it supports what we're doing and how the whales called you anyway. So I don't know how you feel about this, but it sounds kind of destined, you know, destiny changes, but it sounds like a part of destiny, some kind of
Yes.
interspecies destinies, and um and also I've been seeing a lot of people go to Bahia on Instagram. I'm like, why is everybody going to Brazil? You know? Um
It's a very magical place. I mean, I feel like Brazil has the capacity to be a place in the world that can exemplify how we can coexist on every level. I'm talking about across species, across genuses, how we can coexist, how we can come up with ways to coexist that are sustainable. I'm not saying that it has successfully happened across the board. I mean, Brazil has so many issues in terms of racial dynamics and, policing. And I mean, there's a huge, I mean, even in environmental degradation, what's happening in the Amazon, which again, this work is related to that. Um, and I feel that the land itself and the presence of the Amazon, as part of that land, and this ocean and these people, the indigenous people, the people of African descent there, and the mixture of backgrounds that come together, be it European, Japanese, Italian, like in the same way that the United States has a huge mixture of people from different places, Brazil has as well. But I feel like the indigeneity of African culture and indigenous culture, indigenous Brazilian culture there, has remained um, much more integrated into popular culture in Brazil. And therefore, there's this potential for accessing it and its power um, in a way that we're kind of just beginning to get back to here in the States. You know, that's already like the foundation for that is already laid and very present in Brazil. So yeah, and the land is very powerful. It's a very energetically charged place. So,
I'm just I don't know if I have any words except while you were talking, I was like, I wish I could experience that because while you're saying, it's like I guess I don't know, I don't know that dynamic that you're speaking of, like the difference between the US and Brazil and how, when we're thinking about leadership or way showers, I think sometimes the weird global dynamic is that like the US is kind of supposed to be like the lead way shower, but actually it's other countries, that can be examples. Um which I know is probably really, really obvious, but we're constantly getting the message, especially now, of kind of a lot of kind of superiority. And so this just made me think of keep being in a space of learning, you know? Um, being in a space of global learning, like learning from other people from around the world, And you
and
might not.
learning from people who are not human, I think is a really important point that I want to emphasize. You know, anybody who's truly invested in peace work and justice work and in sustainability work and healing work, like if you are only listening to and seriously interacting with humans, you're missing the point. It's
Mhm,
got to be an multi across species and multi-layer, multi-level effort at this point. We have, just like
mhm,
patriarchy is a failed experiment, this, human um, domination is also a failed experiment. And there's much wisdom. And again, all of this is indigenous practice. None of it is new, none of it is
mhm,
news. But the point that we're at on the planet, um, in terms of people talk about climate change, and I always say this is one of the things that has come to me through this work. I call it earth change. I feel like earth change is a much more appropriate way of talking about what's happening because it brings us back to the fact that we inhabit a living being who is
mhm,
going through some changes, you
mhm.
know?
Yeah.
And if we're talking about climate, it kind of addresses the symptoms of the being who is going through these changes rather than um, putting earth at the center, this being who is transforming and is responding, you know to what we as inhabitants are doing. And I feel like that's a more responsible way to approach how we respond to what's happening.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that because I've never heard, you said earth change, right? Earth
Mm-hmm.
change. Yeah, I've never heard of that before, and it made me think of identity. Just what you said about also getting the point of like it's interspecies relationships on different levels. It just made me think of identity and how a person identifies, and if maybe kind of. changing your identity in some way, helps you realize, you're connected to the plants, you're connected to the whales, the clouds, Um, let me see, which is why I love herbalism. I'm totally into water. I feel like I'm a water worker, but plants have been so healing for me, literally. And
Mhm.
and I'm just starting to work with like mushrooms, like reishi, like a reishi elixir. So, I definitely feel you on like at this point to recognize, to kind of come into that conscious interspecies consciousness that you're talking about, and like how to keep sharing reminders, how to keep vocalizing that, and supporting people and coming into that consciousness and being reminded, because I think sometimes you can forget and get distracted. um and so I went to one of your workshops recently where you talked about how you weren't sure, but you said you were pretty sure you might be the only one who is projecting your voice into the ocean. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little more. But maybe you could tie this into like, could you describe the experience of getting on the boat, going out to sea? You talked about working with a hydrophone, just projecting your voice into the ocean. I would love for people, myself too, and people to understand what's going on.
Okay. Um, I will preface this by saying this is definitely a case of like, don't try this at home. I mean, I do have a lot of care around this, and I'm not trying to make it a trend. You know,
Mhm.
I I very much feel that I have been called to do this, and I have, as you mentioned, I've been 7 years in this relationship building with these whales, and it's been a very um, gradual process in terms of incorporating the technology. I did not, you know, go out to sea with equipment for the first time. Now, the folks that I'm working with at the project, they have been recording whale song for decades. So they have these archives of whale songs um, over the years, which is amazing. And so I started off just listening, in terms of using the hydrophone, which is, a microphone that goes down into the water and can pick up atmospheric sounds for several miles. And so through the hydrophone, you can hear the whale song. Sometimes you can hear them just from the boat without any equipment, depending on a lot of different factors. But to hear them in clear detail from above the deck, you need to use a hydrophone. And so I started with just going out with the folks from the project and listening. I can remember very distinctly the first time I heard whale song live. It's transformative. Um, and for the first few years, I just sang to them from the boat without any equipment. And that involves calling them over to the boat with my voice, kind of getting out to the sea and connecting with them telepathically and then singing to call them and, trusting that the whales who show up are the ambassadors who want to interact for that day. And yeah, so a lot of it is also something I didn't say before, which is also foundational. This is offering, you know, like I bring my voice as an offering of repair, as an offering of apology, as an offering of healing. And so I bring my voice as medicine to the whales and to the waters and the other beings of the waters in the same way I bring it to humans. Um, and So, in terms of projecting my voice underwater, there's a speaker that projects my voice underwater so that the hydrophone is picking up both my voice and the whale's voices in interaction with each other. And again, I did not begin using that equipment until I was a few years into the project. And another essential part of this work is slowness. That's something that the whales value and emphasize greatly, um, which is another, you know, decolonization um, key, is moving in a way that um, affirms the trust of a pace that is not frenzied and is not defined by capitalist outcomes and um, intentions. So I had this vision all along of recording with the whales, but I did not start using this equipment until I think the first time I used it was a third season that I was out with the whales. And that was just one time. And then the next year, I actually began recording with them. So it wasn't until the fourth season that I actually began recording with the whales regularly. And even now, I would say that I use the equipment maybe 15 to 20% of the time that I'm interacting with the whales. The vast majority of my time interacting with them is is nourishing this connection, is making offering, is listening, is gaining inspiration for the compositions and the songs that come through, etc. But I have been recording my what I call songversations with them. Shout out to India Ari, who coined the term songversation. And I have these exchanges with them that are vocal, that are musical, that are emotional and spiritual and energetic, and I've been recording them.
Wow. Gosh. I was going to save this question for last, but since we're talking about this, I know you have a new underwater recording between yourself and the whales called Love Wins. That's available on all streaming platforms and can be downloaded on your website for a contribution.
Thank you for the
Um,
plug.
yes. So if anyone is wanting to explore Michaela and the whales medicine, please check out this track, which I'll put in the show notes. But when I have listened to the Love Wins track, I think for my own kind of clarification, I was just wondering, like, they're mirroring you. So you're saying love wins, and they're saying love wins. It's like a call and response.
There's definitely a call and response that's happening. And, coming from the church, call and response can look like a lot of things. There's okay, so and I have a blog post that's about this. I also have a blog on my website, on the Whale Whispering page on my website, that kind of I post on very sporadically, but does go into depth about some of my experiences with the whales in this project. Um, but so there's a way when you're singing with a gospel choir, for example, there's a way in which call and response can manifest as testifying, like a and yes and well, that happens simultaneously with whatever the lead singer is doing, right? So there's call and response that's simultaneous, and then there's call and response that is, you know, one voice or one group of voices responding to the other in turn. And I've been having these call and response um, exchanges with the whales since I started recording with them. And I've had moments where I've heard like a few notes kind of echoed back to me of what I've sung. And I've been very intentional about bringing the same songs year after year, like not coming with a hugely varied um, body of songs, um, with the intention of listening for, the day when at some point they may sing a song back to me. And that's what happened with Love Wins. I, I, was moved to bring this song to the whales for the first time last season, given everything that's going on in the world, all the wars and environmental degradation and hatred and just, madness. And this is a song that I composed like maybe 10 years ago. Really, it's just a chant, really. But I was moved to bring it to the whales. And there's one whale in particular on this track who is singing the melody back to me, like sings the whole melody back to me. And I I still I'm trying to write about it. I'm still trying to find the words to give voice to the experience of that moment, of hearing this whale be like, yes, this is the song that we're gonna take and sing back and affirm and have travel through these waters, because that's another piece of it. And that's why I was saying don't do this at home, because there's so much noise in the ocean. There's so much sonic pollution. And I consider it a gigantic responsibility to be doing this work, and that's why, like I said, my meditation practice, my spiritual practice, I'm not going out there willy-nilly. I am really intentional about what I project and limiting the amount of time that I do it for, etc. And my state of being when I go out. And if I'm not right, I'm not I'm not projecting my voice into the ocean, like it may just be a day when the equipment is not used. Um, but this particular day, um, this song got caught. And with the intention, of saying to humans, this is what we want to affirm, and this is what we want to hear y'all affirming. So that's what's on the track. This whale is singing the melody back repeatedly, um, over the course of, it's almost 17 minutes, the recording.
That's amazing. Yeah, I when I listen to it, I'm able to hear, like, for me, I it's like I go in and out, like I hear it and I listen a little closer to hear, and it sounds like a male whale. I mean, I haven't really thought about gender in whales, but it has like a masculine. It felt, I don't know. Maybe I don't have the right words, but I think it's interesting to like a sentient creature that I have heard whales on the hydrophone before, but I think it's just I think it's just that whole act of like the whale singing back to you. That's you don't come across that. You might not ever experience that, but on your website you can. Y'all can listen to Love Wins.
And there's some other recordings up there as well. There's one that's very interesting called We Are One, where I and many who have listened to it can actually hear this whale forming those words, We Are One. That's the first recording that I released a few years ago. And there's another one called I Hear You, Together We Heal, that kind of like shows this trajectory of this interaction between me and some whales who start off vocalizing in a way that's expressing a lot of distress, what I interpret as distress, and it kind of over the course of our interaction shifts, and you can hear their vocalizing become much more fluid and lyrical and peaceful for my understanding. So again, this is about offering, you know, as well as the healing benefit that I receive from it and the healing benefit that's intended in sharing these recordings. You know, like this is medicine for us. This is something that they are with intention, like they choose to come to the boat and stay with the boat for, sometimes hours at a time, and be in this exchange. And I have no doubt that they understand exactly what is happening. They know that the equipment is picking up their voices. They know that this is something that I am taking back to humans to be able to hear. This is an intentional communication. They want us to hear them, and I feel like that's part of my assignment is sharing with humans the medicine of whale song, and not just whale song, but specifically whale song that is intended for humans. So
Mhm.
they're on purpose in this exchange with a human voice, and they want this to be heard because they want us to know that they're present with us, that they're aware of us, that they're here for us and with us, that they are part of this community on earth, that they are part of the voice of the planet. And I understand that just the act of hearing them, we don't necessarily have to understand all that's coming through. Everybody's going to get a different experience and interpretation of what they hear when they listen, but just the act of hearing their voices is rewiring and transforming and giving us information that we are needing for this time.
Yes. See, when I last summer I had a chance to go out to sea for the first time, and by chance I was able to listen to pilot whales on the hydrophone, and I was really really grateful for that experience because I was working on that boat and not necessarily like a part of the group that was there to like have this intentional experience. But one of the chief scientists, well, it was actually a student, but a student and the chief scientist, marine scientists, were like, "Hey, you should come listen to these pilot whales." And when I heard them, and they were hanging around the boat too, I felt like my literal brain,
Mm-hmm.
my brain change.
Mm-hmm.
And where I'm at in northern New Mexico, I was taking a walk with a new friend, and we heard coyotes, and my brain had the same reaction. And I think that's how I describe it, but it's nice to hear like that we rewiring. Um, and what would happen if we're exposed to more of this? What would happen to our brains, the rewiring? Um, and I think that that's actually really cool to have whale medicine that's specifically for us. I don't know, like that feels like a gift. It's like this exchange of offerings between you and the
Yes.
whales. It feels like like you're a facilitator, or you're a facilitator, a guide, facilitating the well medicine. And um I like that there's a lot of well facilitators. And I think that everyone's journey is very interesting. Like how you're projecting your voice into the ocean. Um and how passionate you are in well, actually, you sound really firm and confident, like, "This is what is happening."
I mean, I am.
I like that. It's like fiery fierce. It's like, "This is what's happening. I want you to know that this medicine, please listen to this medicine, connect."
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It makes me wanna pay attention, and maybe other folks. Um, I have like a few more questions.
Okay.
So one is, I know I read that you're doing collective visioning with the whales, and maybe you spoke about this already, but could you share more about this collective visioning that you're doing with the whales, and if there's anything surprising that's come up or something that you just never saw coming?
Um, well, the collective visioning, I mean, we go back to the conversation of telepathy, right? So I'm in constant communication with the whales. They're always, I'm just in constant connection with them. So I'm kind of constantly getting downloads and guidance and kind of nudges and information, um, and the vision for how to move the project forward, or what kind of the evolution of the work is. So there's that part. And then there's also, how I bring this to humans, as a practice of collectivity. Um, so I've been having, these gatherings, whale whispering gatherings, which you attended one that was online. I also have them in person, where we come together and connect with water. We do water blessings, we sing to water, and evolve a water practice, which is part of the intention of this work as well. Um, and through those gatherings and through that work, I am facilitating people tapping into, um, collective dream work, which is another thing that has been around forever in many cultures, and specifically dreaming with the whales and attuning to the whales, um, through dreaming, because they really are just so much wiser, and their intelligence is far beyond what we can fathom. I mean, just to be in their presence, like, it. There's no need for any kind of testing or proof, like, it, you feel it. You're in the presence of a being that is greater, on every level, not just physically, but I always point to the size of their brains and the size of their hearts. It makes all the sense in the world. And so tapping in to their energy through dreaming is a way of accessing, guidance and answers and tools that we're needing on the planet right now. And also of saying to them, you know, we are here, we are present with you as well. And more of us are tuning in and tapping in and willing and open to, um, being in co-creation, of what the future on this planet looks like, and not just deciding as a species what happens, you know.
Mhm. I love that. I want to go to some collective visioning with whale sessions. And also I wish I was having whale dreams, because I've actually come across a lot of people who have had whale dreams, and I even ran across someone who was building this archive of people who've had dreams with whales. And I hope one day I can have a dream with whales. Um, I just remember I'm in this new program, and the facilitator, they said, I've been dreaming about whales and I'm just trying to figure out what these creatures are trying to communicate to me. And I don't know if that person listens to this, check out Michaela's work. I don't know. I feel like there should be a meetup. All the people having whale dreams. meet at the park. Meet at the park somewhere in the ocean. You do. But thank you for bringing up dream work, because I love dreams, and I feel like my dream practice has been strengthening over the years. I'm just gonna look at my notes really quick, because where I had my notes. I can't access them anymore. Um, so okay, we're winding down. We're winding down. I have three more questions left.
Okay.
Why actually do you think so many people are connecting with and in communication with whales?
Well, I feel very clear that it's the whales who are reaching out to us. I feel that the whales are kind of, tugging on the communication cables. I mean, I had never thought about this before, but I'm just now, the word cable came to my mind, and I'm thinking about how the cables for, Wi-Fi and all this internet stuff run under the ocean. So many of them. Um, so literally, they are like tapping into the wires, to kind of wake us up and shake us up and be like, listen, y'all, this situation is not sustainable. Things are going south, and we've kind of sat back and observed for a long time, but now it's time for us to intervene. And I believe that that's what they're doing. They're intervening, which is why so many people are tuning into them, because they are calling us to attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe that because it just feels like a wave where I keep meeting so many people connecting to whales in different ways. And I said, something is happening here,
Hmm.
you know? Um, so my second to last question is, now feel free if you want to skip this question because I'm also gonna have I want to interview some womb workers and
Mm.
people who are doing work around birth and pregnancy and astrology. Um, and so I wanted to ask you, sorry, I'm trying to, in your Yes Magazine article, which I feel is like a whole meditation, could just kind of sit with that and just ruminate on the words. You talk about whales and the womb, and I've come across a few people who've been making this connection. And also when I did attend your workshop, sorry, I'm not when I did attend your workshop and we were listening to the whales, someone who was also there was like, I was feeling my womb, and I was also feeling my womb too, which that was new for me. I've never experienced that before, even when I listened to recordings on YouTube. And I'm just curious to hear your thoughts about this whale womb connection, um, especially in your Yes Magazine opinion piece. You talked, especially within the context of like Black women, Black womb carrying people. What is the significance of this?
So for me, it's very much goes back to this conversation about diasporic connection, ancestral connection, and the Middle Passage, right, is kind of the site of um, the the real kind of materialization of this horror, that our ancestors went through, of being yanked from their homeland and brought overseas to this existence of enslavement, and the trauma, the womb trauma, that has been such an integral part of, beginning with the colonization process on the continent, through the Middle Passage, through enslavement, through Jim Crow, there, through, apartheid in the United States. There has been womb trauma, and, sexual rape and sexual assault have been um, integral tools that have been used as part of those oppressive um, practices and systems. And so there's generations of Black womb carriers, people with uteruses, Black women who have experienced this systemically. And I, I have dealt with fibroids for many years, and I know so many others who have, and so many, at this point of my peers and relatives have had quote unquote hysterectomies as a result of fibroids mostly, but different kinds of womb illness. And I, um, at some point in this process, somewhere near the beginning, came to understand that whale song is medicine for it's vibrational medicine for the uterus, for whales and for us. Like there's speculation among scientists that it's related to female whales going into estrus, that, whale song is definitely part of the reproductive process and for whales. And it occurred to me that, you know, it could be applied to this specific work of healing intergenerational womb trauma for Black folks specifically. And so I've been looking at that with this work as well. And this year in particular, I want to go much deeper, um, with some other folks kind of coming into collective around exploring how to apply that medicine in that way.
Mm. Yeah, that is powerful because I've been thinking a lot about birth, which is connected, you know, connected to the womb, and how, like, the womb experience can really change your life. It can impact your life. The person who has the womb, and then the baby that's growing in the womb, like, it's this place that just can really shape your life. And if you can get this well medicine out to people, who knows how people's lives will be changed? Who knows what could happen? And it just seems like this work with whales just goes in all sorts of directions. Um,
Hmm.
it's really interesting. And so for my last question, if you have any suggestions on how people can make an offering to the ocean or a water body where they're at, um, to the whales, like, how can people do something maybe today or this week that can connect to the whales and the planet and where they are?
Well, on the most basic level, um, you can do what I, have been encouraging people to do, which is develop a water practice, a practice of blessing water. So even if you don't live near the ocean, you can just get a glass of water, or a bowl of water, and speak your blessings into the water, your gratitude into the water, your prayers into the water for for the healing and the repair of all the waters of the world, including the oceans. Um, and singing, I think, is a great offering. You have first and foremost your voice. And I always say offering is um, I like to ask people what the opposite or the inverse of extraction is, and my answer is offering. And so you can always make an offering with your voice. You can sing a song to the waters or songs to the waters. You can bring offerings if you want to make a physical offering. Flowers, flower petals, I think, are a lovely way to bring the energy of beauty and levity and renewal, and refreshing to the waters. And then obviously on practical levels, and part of the idea of a water practice is to be more aware of water and how you use it and how you interact with it. And by extension, the natural world in general, right? So conserving the water that you use, developing, practices around recycling and not using single use plastics and, you know, supporting organizations and systems that are doing this work to preserve and protect and clean up the oceans and supporting policies that affirm this work. And as we're looking at, some of the systems that we've been familiar with dissolve and take on different shapes that we don't know what they'll look like, I feel like it's more and more important for us to focus on what we um, can do practically in our personal actions and in our communities, not ignoring systemic, policies, et cetera, continuing to definitely insist on having laws that protect the waters and the environment, um, but also understanding that each individual has personal power. Um, And so there's always something that we can do, even if it is just holding a glass of water and singing a song or speaking a prayer into it, that has an energetic impact. We start from there and move out, you know.
Mhm. Thank you. I think that everything you shared can be helpful in one way or another to whoever is listening. And before we end this episode, is there anything you want to share? Any last words on your heart you want to share?
Well, I want to thank you as well. It's been such a delight to speak with you. Um, yeah, listening, I feel is so key right now. There's so much conversation, which is good, it's important. But I feel like, particularly with the culture that social media promotes, there's there's cacophony. There's a lot of outward expression, and there's a lot to be gained from that. But there's a lot to be gained from listening as well, and especially to pods, what I call people of diverse species. Um, it's a good time to be listening.
Hmm, it's a good time to be listening. I've been doing a lot of that, and that's a great affirmation or confirmation to keep going, keep listening. I want to say thank you again. Thank you so much for meeting me at the through line. And I hope everyone who's listening enjoys this episode. And just want to say thanks again, Michaela.
Thank you so much, Simone. Thank you for your work.
Yeah, and I wish you all the best with all your adventures. Just look forward to following your work.
Thank you, my dear.